Before them stood a man dressed in red. Hua Cheng was leaning against the stone wall, blocking their way with a smile. If you do, who knows what will happen? While his mouth was smiling, his eye held not a trace of mirth, but it was instead dark and muddied. He hugged one of his arms, while his other hand idly fondled with something small. It was a deep red coral pearl tied to his thin braid. The coral's luminous red luster was bright and dazzling as the red affinity knot on his pale finger. Neither the hundreds of charmed talismans, nor the heavy piles of boulders had stopped him. Fengshen and Muqing both reacted swiftly. Fengshen shot a barrage of arrows as Muqing swung his saber to send an air blaze strike toward Huocheng, then grabbed Xilian and ran. Fengshen employed his same old trick and struck wildly at the rock walls. "What the fuck?" he cried. "How did he find us so fast?" "How should I know?" Muqing yelled back. "Wait! The red string! The red string! His finger is still tied with that red string!" When it dawned on them, they both turned around to seize Xilian's hand, as if he would let them. Xilian clutched the red knot on his finger to protect it and exclaimed, "You can't!" "Your Highness, he'll find us as long as you keep that red string tied to you," Fengshen insisted. "If you don't want him to catch up, it has to be removed." Xilian still held on, guarding his finger. "I'm not afraid of him catching up. I want to ask him about this face to face." Muqing's eyes widened. "You still want to talk to him? I don't think you realize how dangerous he is you'll realize how dangerous he is until he's devoured you whole." "But I already know he's dangerous," Xilian countered. "You guys won't tell me what that mural shows, and you won't let me go near him. You won't convince me of anything acting like this. He's a ghost king, and his behavior is abnormal. People would usually stay far away based on that alone. You shouldn't need to be convinced of anything." Xilian raised 2 fingers. "Two choices. You either let me go back and ask him to explain, or you let me go back to look at that mural." Fengshen and Muqing seemed to remember something terrifying. One's lips began to twitch, while the other one's brow could not furrow any deeper. They both stood blocking him, and yelled in unison, "We'll allow neither!" Thus Xilian rolled up his sleeves. "Well, since you both said no, let's solve this with our fists. Who's first? Or will you come at me together?" Muqing turned to Fengshen. "You first." Then he backed away to the side of the tunnel. Fengshen didn't seem confident that he could win against Xilian, but he was determined to give it his best shot to rescue this wayward youth. He gripped his bow. "Very well. Your Highness, pardon my insolence. Before Xilian could even return the opening courtesy, he felt something hot being stuck to his back. Someone behind him shouted, "Stay still! Don't talk!" And he was rendered as stiff as an iron board. And not just his body. He also couldn't move his mouth to speak. Muqing darted out from behind Xilian. "Let's drag him away. That talisman will paralyze him temporarily, but it won't last long," he said to Fengshen. Fengshen was slightly dumbfounded. "Why did you ambush him? Didn't we agree to go one-on-one?" Xilian was shocked as well that Muqing would immediately go back on his word. He wouldn't have been deceived so easily had it not been for his wholehearted trust in both of his once subordinates. "Who has time for you to go one-on-one right now?" Muqing said. "He's doing it on purpose. It's easy to see that he's dragging things out to give Huocheng time to catch up. Do you see the state he's in right now? Completely enchanted. No matter what you tell him, nothing will get through. Once they meet, Huocheng will probably only need to charm him with a few lies and he'll believe him. Just like someone who's under a fox spirit's thrall." Fengshen considered this, and decided that what Muqing said made some sense. "Your Highness," he sighed, "we didn't intend to deceive you, but his behavior towards you is really unseemly. I can't even speak of it. Please, just come with us." "Let's go," Muqing said. Muqing's words weren't a suggestion or a plea. They were a command. He must have struck a command talisman on Xilian's back, drawn in his own blood. A command talisman could ostensibly make its target obey the spellcaster's every whim, but in reality could only realize simple commands like do not speak, walk, stop, run, and so on. More complicated commands were harder to execute, and the talisman couldn't confound the target's mind. Only powerful ghosts like the Brocade Immortal could manage such things. The two hurried along with Xilian in tow again, but they were stopped by a pile of rubble blocking the way. Fengshen saw that their path had been cut off, and wondered aloud, "Why are there rocks blocking the way? We can't go any farther." "Weren't you the one who knocked them down?" Why are you asking me? Muqing said. You were the one leading the way, so you're the one who messed up. Why are we somewhere we've already been anyway? Why would you circle back around? Function questioned. Muqing refused to be questioned. What a joke! I don't know the roads here, so how could I possibly lead? Haven't we been running around randomly all this time? Sensing that they were about to get into another argument, Function waved it off. Never mind, it's not worth wasting my breath on you. Let's just dig through this. Hua-Chang was pursuing them from behind, so they could only go forward. Retreat wasn't an option if they wanted to avoid running into him. Blocking roads was easy, but digging through that blockage was much harder. They made Xilian stand obediently in a corner while Function rained down random punches on the boulders, and Muqing, with bulging veins, swung his mighty Shanmado to shatter the rocks. They cleared the path in no time. Rubble rolled and dust clouded the air, but just as they were about to call Xilian over, they saw a red-clad figure standing in the now open passage amidst clouds of settling dust. Xilian's eyes instantly lit up. It was Hua-Chang. The Ghost King's gaze was cold. He stood silently with his hands clasped behind his back. Why won't you go away? Function blurted. This man was the very definition of persistence. They had left him in the dust, so how had he managed to appear ahead of them? How long had he been standing there, waiting in silence as they cleared away the obstacle blocking their way to deliver themselves right into his hands? He was frighteningly tenacious and sinister. Function and Muqing quickly backed away, putting some distance between them. Hua-Chang didn't look at them. His gaze moved to one side of the tunnel, and he took a step in Xilian's direction. Function and Muqing realized why he was here, and rushed to Xilian's side in a flash to guard him. Don't come any closer! They both shouted at once. Hua-Chang's expression turned extremely dark. Normally, if someone dared to tell Crimson Rain Sunflower to stay away, he wouldn't give a damn. He'd simply laugh and approach anyway. But at that moment, he seemed genuinely wary, not daring to move recklessly. He paused his step. After a moment, he finally spoke. His words came slowly, and his tone was calm. What do you two mean by this? Function, however, cut straight to the point. You don't need to pretend anymore. We know this is your old lair. We've already seen what those divine statues are, and the murals too. We've seen everything. Hua-Chang wasn't directly facing them. He stood at an angle. The hands tucked behind his back seemed to jerk at Function's words, and the two of his fingers curled stiffly inward. His Highness saw it too, he asked softly, inclining his head. His voice was very, very quiet. While he still sounded unfazed, his voice was slightly cracked and obviously strange. No! Xilian cried mentally. The truth was that he hadn't seen much. But at the moment, Xilian could neither move nor speak. He could only lean dutifully against the wall in the corner, which made it look like he was hiding behind the other two. It must have seemed like he was afraid to face Hua-Chang and refused to speak with him. Function drew his bow. That's right. We now understand your intentions. With respect for your position as a Ghost King, if you still know self-respect and conduct yourself with any dignity, we ask that you don't come near His Highness again. Xilian's feelings were like a cottage on fire, black smoke roiling heavy and thick. Hua-Chang should have noticed that something was amiss, and Xilian could only hope that he would question him directly to find out what was wrong. But Hua-Chang's current state seemed to render him unable to notice such a thing. Don't go near him, he said coldly. What right do either of you have to say that to me? Not waiting for their response, Hua-Chang's eye flashed dangerously. But you've reminded me that we have unfinished business to settle. The moment he finished speaking, countless shrieking silver butterflies shot forth toward them. In the face of such an attack, a spiritual shield was the only option. Function and Muqing cried in unison, Shield! The butterfly dolge was blocked by the formless spiritual shield, and shattered into shimmering silver light, which rapidly recrystallized into new silver butterflies and attacked once more. The onslaught was completely unstoppable. Function and Muqing gave ground slowly as they kept their shields up, and Hua-Chang steadily advanced, step by step. The whirling winds raised by his spiritual aura stirred his raven hair, and it danced wildly with every gust. The mad fury and violence in his eye was on full display under the blinding light of the silver butterflies. Defending alone wouldn't get them anywhere. Function and Muqing exchanged a look, silently agreeing to go on the attack. They maintained the spiritual shield as they charged forward. Then, with weapons flashing, the three began to fight in the narrow stone corridor. Function battled with the wrath butterflies, while Muqing faced Hua-Chang. Hua-Chang flung out an arm, and the scimitar appeared in his left hand, ready to strike. This was the first time Xiaolian witnessed Ming fighting seriously. The scimitar was long, slender, and chillingly murderous, and it gleamed with threatening silver light. It was truly a wicked blade overflowing with evil. The battle was truly thrilling to behold. Huacheng stood his ground even when fighting 2 against 1, and Xiaolian watched unblinkingly with bated breath. With a flick of Ming's blade, Muqing's Zhanmado was knocked off course and into the rocks. Although Muqing still had a grip on the hilt, the blade was stuck. He couldn't yank his own weapon out. This only shocked Muqing for a moment, but Huacheng's fist was already swinging right into his jaw. The punch sent Muqing flying through the air, and he finally lost grip on his saber's hilt. Meanwhile, each arrow Fengshen shot at the butterflies was snapped by their sharp wings. The sheer number of butterflies was ultimately too difficult to deal with. At this point, both victory and defeat were a foregone conclusion. Countless white silk tendrils slithered from the corners of the corridor and wrapped Fengshen and Muqing into giant cocoons once more. The more they struggled, the tighter their bindings became. Muqing tore at the silk as he yelled, "I knew you were the one who threw us into that pit!" "This isn't spider silk!" Fengshen exclaimed. "This is—" It dawned on Xiaolian as well. It was butterfly silk. Butterflies emerged from chrysalises, which they wove from their own silk. This strange white silk was completely of Huacheng's making, and it was probably linked to his aggressive wrath butterflies. With the match decided, Huacheng sheathed his scimitar. "I threw you in to save you from disaster. Otherwise, you would have never had a chance to find this cave of 10,000 gods," he jeered. "And it was your yelling that caused the avalanche. Why don't you thank me for saving your puny little lives?" Huacheng had probably planned to wait out the avalanche at first, getting Xiaolian out once the snowy mountain quieted down and leaving Fengshen and Muqing behind. But unexpectedly the pair had gnawed through the chrysalises and made enough noise that Xiaolian had discovered them, which led to all the trouble afterward. If not for all that, Xiaolian might really have just followed Huacheng straight out without looking at a single divine statue. But the worst case scenario had come to pass. Every secret had been torn out and exposed under the sun. Despite the anxiety roiling under the surface, Xiaolian's body still sat obediently in place. Huacheng's gaze was growing colder and more intense as he stared condescendingly down at Muqing. It seems I'm the only one with real talent for sabers." "Not you," he quietly stated. Muqing's throat was bound by a few bands of white silk, and his face changed from blue to red and back as he was strangled. Blood leaked from the corners of his lips, and he choked out, You! I see, I get it." Fengshen gritted out through his teeth. "What do you get?" "I get why this bastard hates me so much now," Muqing said. "He probably hates you for the same reason." Why?" Fengshen demanded through his coughs. "Because he's insane," Muqing said hatefully through his own coughing. Have you forgotten what was in those murals? He was that young soldier His Highness wanted to promote after he returned from Beiji Hill. His Highness had said his swordplay was good and that he was well suited to the saber." "Why'd that make him hate you?" Fengshen questioned. Muqing didn't reply. Bam! Huacheng landed another punch on Muqing's face. Huacheng gave a chilling smile and answered on Muqing's behalf. "Because he kicked me out of the army." To think Muqing had done something like that. Fengshen was astonished. "What the fuck? Why'd you do that? How'd he piss you off?" Muqing's face was covered in blood. "I just made him go home. It's not like it's good to fight in a war. How could I have known he'd wind up being this crazy and holding grudges all this time?" Huacheng cut him off with another punch, so forceful that Muqing's face almost contorted when it landed. Bam! Huacheng smiled. "Did you think I couldn't guess why you kicked me out?" Muqing looked away, and Huacheng snickered. "I guess it's clear which of us is actually useless trash, Muqing spat out a mouthful of blood, and grimaced like he'd been stabbed where it hurt. He replied, spitefully slowly, "Thank goodness I kicked you out. If we'd kept you in the army and let you get closer to His Highness, were you going to watch him all day with your mind full of unspeakable filth? Disgusting." Xiaolian's heart squeezed violently. Huacheng had his fist raised at first, but it froze in midair when Muqing spat the word disgusting. Veins bulged in the back of his pale hand. The fingers clenched and loosened. loosened, then clenched. A long moment later, Hua Cheng said icily, "For now, I won't argue with you on that point. But tell me one thing, and tell me honestly. Your argument before the avalanche. Is that true?" Muqing looked to Fengshen with wide eyes. Fengshen looked back, his own eyes round and bulging. Neither of them knew how to respond. "My patience is limited," Hua Cheng said sharply. "Answer me on the count of 3. 1, 2. Such a rush for an answer. An idea struck Muqing within his panic. "Your Highness, run!" he cried. The moment the command was issued, the damn spell stuck to Shilian's back forced him to bolt. Hua Cheng swung around toward him, and 2 bands of white butterfly silk shot from the corners of the cave to bind Shilian. He fell to the ground before he'd even managed 2 steps. To an observer, it looked like Shilian had been frozen in terror this whole time. Or perhaps that he'd been struggling to accept the truth about Hua Cheng, or had simply decided he didn't want to intervene in their fight. Now it looked like he'd finally decided to flee, but had failed. The truth was, though, he had never even considered running away. Shilian's hands and feet were tightly bound by the thick white silk. He lay sprawled on the ground with his black hair and white sleeves splayed out around him. His bamboo hat had rolled off to one side. Hua Cheng slowly turned to him, paused for a long moment, then made his way to Shilian's side. He'd only taken a few steps before Fengshen could no longer hold back a desperate shout. "Hua Cheng!" Hua Cheng paused in his step and tilted his head. Let His Highness go!" Fengshen forced out a plea. "He's suffered enough! Don't... to him!" Hua Cheng didn't reply. He came to Shilian's side and, with one hand on his back and one hand under his knees, swept him into his arms. Shilian lay against Hua Cheng's chest. Even though they were sealed in those giant white chrysalises, he could see Fengshen and Muqing's expressions. Fengshen looked like he was watching a lamb entering a tiger's mouth, as if Shilian was going to be ripped apart and devoured, and he started yelling. Muqing started tearing at the white silk with his teeth again, but the awkward angle meant his struggles came to nothing. Hua Cheng knew the pathways of this cave of 10,000 gods like the back of his hand. After many forks and turns, the 2 figures and their voices soon disappeared. Carrying Shilian in his arms, Hua Cheng moved deeper into the darkness of the cave's innermost dens. The only light around them came from the gently fluttering silver wrath butterflies. Shilian couldn't see the expression on Hua Cheng's face, but he could feel the tension in his body. Hua Cheng had held him like this in the past, but it was obvious that something had changed. He wouldn't even touch Shilian's neck or hands directly. Shilian kept eyeing Hua Cheng's face, trying to blink hard enough that he'd notice, but Hua Cheng kept avoiding his gaze. Hua Cheng took him into a chamber with a stone bed, where he quickly brought him and set him down. As he lay Shilian on the bed, he noticed something and checked Shilian's back. They cast a spell on you." Shilian was overjoyed. He'd finally discovered it. Still, it had taken him incredibly long to notice that there was something off about Shilian, which just showed how badly Hua Cheng had been caught off guard. Shilian waited for him to remove the command talisman from his back, but Hua Cheng's hand paused before he touched the offending paper. In the end, Hua Cheng withdrew his hand and laid Shilian flat on the bed. "Don't worry, Your Highness. I won't kill those 2 useless pieces of trash. For now," Hua Cheng said in a low voice, perhaps attempting to reassure Shilian. "Even though I'd really like to murder them." There was a layer of thick, soft, fresh hay on the stone bed. It didn't jab Shilian at all as he lay there limply, but he was so anxious that his insides were smoking. He couldn't understand why Hua Cheng wouldn't release him from the spell, just as he was trying desperately to struggle his way out of its control. Hua Cheng reached for the sash around Shilian's waist and began to untie it. In an unfortunate coincidence, that was the moment when the command talisman on Shilian's back started to fade. He kicked out hard with one leg. "Ah!" escaped his lips. His spasm looked like nothing more than the jerk of a dying fish twitching in its last attempt at life, and objecting with no real power. Still, Hua Cheng froze instantly and withdrew his hand. "I won't." At that point, Hua Cheng seemed to decide that his tone was too harsh and that his actions might be scaring or repulsing Shilian. He backed away a few steps and softened his voice. His expression was cautious and resigned, but otherwise unreadable. "Your Highness, I won't do anything to you," he said in a low voice. Don't be scared." Shilian finally understood. Hua Cheng still wasn't sure what kind of response he would receive from Shilian upon releasing the spell, so he was refusing to hear it altogether. Hua Cheng seemed to be holding back some sort of urge, and he once again assured him in a quiet voice that sounded like a vow, "Your Highness, trust me." He said that exact phrase before, but this time, all his normal confidence was gone. Jillian wanted to answer him, but couldn't, and didn't dare struggle anymore lest Hua Cheng's misunderstanding deepen. He could only lie there, flat and motionless, waiting patiently for the power of the command talisman to fade entirely. Seeing that Jillian had stopped resisting, Hua Cheng approached again, reached out, and gingerly finished untying Jillian's belt. "Sanlang," Jillian cried out in his mind. Jillian wholeheartedly believed that Hua Cheng would never take advantage of a helpless person, but this new development was completely unexpected. He couldn't help his eyes widening. Hua Cheng set about loosening Jillian's clothes, but he seemed to avoid touching Jillian's body, which slowed him down. It was a long while before Jillian's outer robes were removed, and the inner robe followed. A wrath butterfly perched on the curve of Jillian's shoulder, and a warm, tingling feeling crawled over his skin. It was only then that Jillian realized the state he was in. His skin was red and slightly swollen, even cracked in some areas. But when the silver butterfly perched on him, his injuries had started to heal. This was frostbite he'd gotten from tumbling all over the frozen mountain, but Jillian hadn't noticed it since he was fairly used to pain at this point. If he had frostbite, then he had frostbite. Even if he had noticed the injuries earlier, he probably would have left them to heal on their own. But Hua Cheng knew even better than Jillian himself where he was hurt, and he wouldn't let it go. He would address Jillian's injuries no matter what. Jillian's thoughts were interrupted when Hua Cheng took his arm and raised it. There were even more patches of frostbite on his hands and feet, and many of the spots were bleeding due to all this frantic running and pulling he'd been subjected to recently. Jillian wasn't afraid of pain, but he was ticklish, and in spite of himself, fragmented memories from years past surfaced in his mind. The trembling, heated hands of a boy in a dark cave, random panicked touches, irregular breathing, and racing hearts. At first, these memories were hazy and incredibly faint. Jillian had packed them away and tossed them into a corner of his mind long ago. But as the memories began to resurface, they had a surprisingly different taste. And it made Jillian want to hold his head and scream, especially with Hua Cheng right in front of him, doing nearly the same thing he'd done once upon a time. Jillian's face and mind were burning. He was afraid Hua Cheng would see his distress, but Hua Cheng didn't look at him at all. He fulfilled his promise, completely, and never crossed the line. He kept his head slightly turned away, averting his gaze from Jillian's half-exposed white shoulder. Suddenly, a jeering voice rang out from behind Hua Cheng. "Hua Cheng, you madman! What do you think you're doing to His Highness? You're disgusting!" Hua Cheng whipped his head toward the voice. Jillian looked past him to see who had reached the entrance of the cavern chamber. The speaker was Mulching, with Function beside him. Despite being so recently wrapped in giant chrysalises, they had somehow broken free and found this place. Their faces had gone pale at the scene in the side of the cavern, and Jillian's face paled in turn. What an awful sight! Function pointed at Hua Cheng, then pointed at Jillian with his clothes peeled halfway off. It was a long moment before he could squeeze out, You, let him go right now!" Hua Cheng quickly pulled Jillian's clothes back in place. "You useless trash dare hunt us down?" he said coldly. "I think you're tired of living." "Keep your filthy hands off of him! Does the ugly toad want a taste of swan meat?" Muching sneered. "Never mind dreaming of it for 800 years. You can hope for 1,000 more, but don't even think of touching a single one of His Highness's fingers." Jillian's heart dropped, but while the comments annoyed him, he could sense that something was amiss. What was wrong with these two? They shouldn't have spewed such malicious words, even if Hua Cheng had beaten them to a pulp earlier. It was especially uncharacteristic of Muching. It seemed like they were purposely trying to provoke Hua Cheng, but there was no reason for that. They knew they couldn't beat him. So what did they want? Moreover, their tones subtly pointed the spear in Jillian's direction. It was like they wanted to stir up confusion, as though they wanted Hua Cheng to do something to Jillian in a fit of anger. Sure enough, darkness flashed over Hua Cheng's blanched face, and he threatened softly, "Since you both came seeking death?" Jillian could see the naked, murderous intent in his eyes, and horror filled him. "Don't!" he cried. Too late, Hua Cheng unsheathed his scimitar, and flashed cold. Fengxian and Muqing were both startled by the strike, and they reflexively looked down at themselves, but they saw no visible injuries on their bodies. Just a moment later, before they had the chance to breathe in relief or retaliate, the upper halves of their bodies split from their lower halves and fell to the floor with a thud. Blood spurted and gushed, spilling over and flooding the ground. Shilian had never expected things to go like this. He lay limply on the stone bed, completely dumbstruck. Huocheng had actually sliced Fengxian and Muqing in half. They weren't dead yet. They tumbled to the ground, one gritting his teeth, the other yelling furiously. It was a sight too tragic to witness. Huocheng's expression was frigid as he sheathed his scimitar. His face was dotted with only a few drops of blood, but the tinge of red complemented the aura of evil surrounding him, and made him look even more striking. Huocheng stood in the pool of blood for a moment, then turned to walk toward Shilian. Shilian stared with wide eyes at Huocheng's grim approach. By the time Shilian snapped out of his stupor, Huocheng had already reached his side. He clutched one of Shilian's hands and pulled him into an intense embrace. "How can I possibly let go?" he whispered. Shilian couldn't speak, being held so tightly in his arms. And then Huocheng whispered something else in his ear. Shilian's heart was pounding so wildly he thought it might jump out of his chest, when he suddenly felt his body tense. The command talisman that Muqing had stuck to his back had finally been released. Even though Huocheng said he wouldn't let go, he still loosened his embrace just a little, and let Shilian leave his hold once he released him from the command talisman. Shilian took a deep breath, then leapt to his feet and charged over to the pool of blood on the ground. "Fengxian! Muqing! Are you two all right?" Muqing's injuries were more severe. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth, and the light in his eyes had faded. But Fengxian still had breath left, and he gripped Shilian's hand tightly. "Your Highness!" Shilian clutched his hand in turn. What? What do you want to say?" Fengxian swallowed a mouthful of blood, and managed to grit out, "Watch out for Huocheng. Don't go near him. He's a monster." It seemed that Fengxian had used up all that remained of his strength to give Shilian that warning before he died. Unexpectedly, the expression on Shilian's face gradually calmed. Monster. He let go of Fengxian's hand and rose to his feet. "I wonder, is he more of a monster than you two?" That shocked Fengxian. Without pausing for a response, Shilian drew Fengxian and pierced Fengxian's heart, nailing him dead to the ground in a flash. "Your Highness, you—" Fengxian sputtered in shock, but before he could finish, he stopped breathing. Shilian withdrew Fengxian from Fengxian's heart, and shook it clean of blood before he returned to Huocheng's side. He kept his sword pointed at the corpses on the ground, all the while. "Now that blood has been spilt, there's no need to keep talking through their skins." A jeering laugh echoed from the ground. Muqing's body had been sliced in half at the waist, but its head turned around to show that it was the one laughing. Its upper half was sprawled face down, so even if it turned its head, its cheek should have been pressed to the ground. But the corpse's head kept turning until it was fully backward, and lifted it, laughing at Shilian all the while. As suspected, these were not the real Fengxian and Muqing, but imposters from who knew where. The real Fengxian and Muqing were still trapped in those giant white chrysalises, trying to gnaw themselves free. That was what Huocheng had whispered when he released Shilian from the command talisman. Their faces were pale, not from shock or horror, but because they weren't human to begin with. Shilian flashed his sword. Fengxian and Muqing both smiled chillingly and replied in unison, "As you wish." Then they melted into puddles of something that resembled thick blood. Huocheng moved to shield Shilian. The two bloody puddles flowed across the ground and merged into one, bubbling like they were boiling. Soon the pool formed to the shape of a man. A chill spiked up Shilian's spine from waist to neck as he watched that indescribable mass contort itself and grow bit by bit. Soon, Fengxian and Muqing were completely gone. The person who had replaced them was a tall, slender young man dressed in white. Judging by his size, the young man seemed to be about 17 or 18 years of age. He was wearing a mask, half of it crying, half of it smiling. While his face couldn't be seen, a youthful, crisp, bright voice came from behind the mask. "How are you, Shilian?" he said warmly. Shilian's lips twitched unconsciously, and his mind went numb. Huocheng had been shielding him, but now the Ghost King raised his blade and lunged at the man. The white-clad man was dauntless in the face of Ameng's wicked sharpness, and the blade missed him by mere millimeters as he sidestepped. In the span of a second, he flashed behind Huacheng. He reached for Shilian like he wanted to touch his face. Silver light streaked and Huacheng blocked that hand, shielding Shilian once more. Huacheng's voice was cold. "Keep your filthy hands off him!" He threw the warning right back at him. The white-clad man's right hand was severed by Umming's slash, and the limb fell to the ground. But the man seemed like he barely noticed the injury. He simply shook out his expansive sleeve to briefly hide the severed limb, then shook the sleeve back again. A new hand had grown in the old one's place. His fingers curled into claws and he aimed directly for Huacheng's right eye. It all happened in under a second. Huacheng dodged just as fast, but the attack still left two bloody scratches across his cheek. For the first time, Huacheng faced an opponent he couldn't overtake in speed. His gaze turned sharp and he changed tactics on the spot. He called forth millions of wrath butterflies, and they swarmed the man in a frenzy. The myriad butterflies wrapped the white-clad man inside a large, shimmering silver chrysalis, but that likely wouldn't last long. Huacheng was about to grab Shilian when the silver butterflies shrieked and exploded into sparkling powder. Seeing the subtle change to Huacheng's expression as so many wrath butterflies were destroyed at once, Shilian knew that this wasn't good. The white-clad man had blown apart the wrath butterflies, and now he was hidden within the shimmering silver powder that choked the air. His newly grown hands struck out once more, aiming again for Huacheng's right eye. This time, it was Shilian's turn. He pulled out Fengxian and slashed. His strike didn't just chop off the white-clad man's hand, nor his entire arm. It very nearly bisected him entirely. Seeing the chance, Huacheng called out, "Your Highness, let's go!" Shilian knew they shouldn't get entangled in this fight, and that they should quit while they were ahead. He retreated, and the two rushed out of the cavern together. They bolted down the dark tunnel, unhampered by any obstacles. "It's him! He really didn't die!" Shilian exclaimed as he ran. Huacheng led the way. He was faster and dashed easily, setting up butterfly formations and silk traps along the way to trip up any pursuers. "He might not be the original." Shilian came to an abrupt stop and clutched his head. "No! I can feel it! He's the same! Not only is he still alive, but he's even stronger than before! Something let him be reborn! How else could he transform so easily into Fengxian and Muljing? It's very difficult to impersonate heavenly officials! It should be nearly impossible to create fake skins of them!" Hearing his tone go frantic, Huacheng also stopped and turned back. He took Shilian's hand and gripped it. "Don't be scared, Your Highness. He might not really be stronger. There's another possibility. He could be very familiar with Fengxian and Muljing. That's why he could create fake skins in them. He must be someone all of you—" Before he finished, Shilian's gaze fell to the hand that was clutching his own. Huacheng's words and expression both froze. He paled and withdrew his hand, tucked it behind his back, and turned to continue onward. Shilian, however, didn't follow. "Salang," he called out. Huacheng's body stiffened. He paused in his step, but didn't look back. He only acknowledged, "Your Highness," in a carefully calm voice. "A lot just happened, and everyone's a little flustered and confused," Shilian said from behind him. Huacheng answered. "Everything is still kind of confusing. But I want to take the time to ask you a question," Shilian continued. "I hope you'll answer me honestly and seriously." "All right," Huacheng agreed. "Who exactly is that noble, gracious, special someone?" Shilian asked solemnly. Huacheng's finger, the one that was tied with a red affinity knot, subtly twitched a few times. He was silent for a while before he eventually answered, "If Your Highness already knows, then why ask?" Shilian nodded. "I see. So I didn't misunderstand you. It really is true." Huacheng didn't respond. After a pause, Shilian asked, his tone flat, "Don't you want to know how I feel about this?" Huacheng inclined his head slightly. It was like he wanted to glance back but was too afraid to look Shilian in the eye. Only the 2 streaks of blood on his cheek could be seen. "Your Highness, would you please not tell me?" His voice cracked as he asked. "I'm sorry," Shilian said. "Something like this has to be made clear." Huacheng didn't need to breathe, but he still sucked in a deep breath. Although his face was awfully pale, he still smiled and replied courteously, "That's true. It's for the best." He was like a criminal on death row, waiting for his sentence. He closed his eye. Yet his eye didn't remain closed for long. Soon it snapped open once more as a pair of arms suddenly encircled him from behind and caught him in a forceful embrace. Shilian buried his face in Huacheng's back, but he didn't speak either. Though nothing was said, it was enough. It was a long time before Shilian felt the man he was hugging turn around. Huacheng fervently returned the embrace, engulfing Shilian in his arms. From above his head, Shilian heard Huacheng's staggering response. "Your Highness, you really will be the death of me." Just then, the sound of an explosion echoed through the deep recesses of the cave. A blinding white light flashed in the darkness, followed by a series of shrieks from the silver butterflies. They both looked up, and their expressions changed. Shilian loosened his grip on Huacheng's sleeves. "Let's talk later," Shilian said, and thus the two continued on, except now they were running hand in hand. Shilian's face was still hot, but he spoke with forced calm like nothing had happened. "Senlan, how did you discover that Function and Muqing who approached us were dummies? Where are the real ones?" Huacheng was in essentially the same state. "I left behind wrath butterflies to monitor the two useless pieces of trash. How could there be two more of them?" "Don't worry, Your Highness. They're fine. They won't die." "Then we have to release Function and Muqing from the chrysalises," Shilian said. "It'll be bad if he finds them while they have no way to fight back." "This way. Follow me," Huacheng answered. The Cave of 10,000 Gods was indeed his territory. Even when they came to crossroads that branched into multiple different paths, he immediately and accurately knew which ones to take. It wasn't long before they returned to the area where they'd left Function and Muqing. Even from a distance, they could hear those two flinging accusations at each other. "Why did you tell His Highness to run? Now you've done it, he's been carried off." "What? Should I have had him stand around to be butchered?" "Huh? You just wanted him to distract Huacheng and lead him away. Am I wrong?" Shilian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Both men in the giant white chrysalises on the walls were simultaneously gnawing at the silk and yelling at each other, and they were so surprised when they saw him return that they forgot to spit out the white silk dangling from their mouths. "How did you escape?" Shilian's bamboo hat was still on the ground, where he dropped it, and he quickly picked it up and tied it around his neck. The heavy white silk released Function and Muqing before retreating into the shadows. The two of them tumbled to the ground, beaten black and blue. When they saw Huacheng emerge from behind Shilian, their faces twitched. They probably thought they were in for another round of beatings, or that things would otherwise get rough again. However, when Function reached out to grab Shilian's arm and pull him back, Shilian grabbed hold of Huacheng first. "Your Highness?" Function was flummoxed. Huacheng was already starting to lead the way once more. "Go, this way." As if those two dared to follow him. "Your Highness, why are you still with him?" Function questioned. "Didn't I tell you he's lost his mind?" Muqing said. "He's completely enchanted." Shilian didn't bother to argue. He just gently but very firmly held on to Huacheng. "There's no time to explain now. Let's get out of here first. There's an enemy after us." With Shilian holding him like that, Huacheng's eye began to twinkle. A moment later, he smiled. "I suggest you both hold your tongues and follow. I'm in a good mood, so I won't fight you." For now. Function and Muqing were left in complete disbelief by this display, and complicated expressions plastered on their faces. They just couldn't comprehend why Shilian still walked so nonchalantly beside a terrifying devil who had stalked him for over 800 years with a mind full of unspeakable thoughts. It was like playing with fire and delighting in the burns. Muqing was skeptical, but eventually chose to focus on the other point. "You said there's an enemy here. This Cave of 10,000 Gods is his territory, so what kind of enemy could there possibly be? Did this enemy give him those scratches on his face? I doubt there are many out there who can injure Crimson Rainsop Flower." "It's White No-Face," Shilian replied. At the sound of the name, Function and Muqing's faces both changed, and they followed Shilian without another word. They knew well that Shilian could joke or lie about anything except that one man. Shilian would never make light of him, nor would he ever mistake him. Even though they'd just been fighting each other to the death in this Cave of 10,000 Gods, now they were fleeing like mad together. "Just what is going on?" Muqing demanded. Shilian gave them an account of the white-clad man who had stolen their appearances, and they were both stunned. "Disguised as us? How is that possible?" "It's true," Shilian said. "Everything happened so fast and I didn't get a good look, but it was absolutely you two at a glance." Function was dumbfounded. "But how can White No-Face still exist? Didn't the Emperor kill him?" "I wouldn't be surprised if that thing can't be killed so easily," Muqing said. "Maybe it died at the time, but I'm sure it could revive itself given the right chance." That reminded Shilian of something, and he turned to Huacheng. Sanlang, right after we made it into Mount Tonglu territory, you opened your stasis with a start and urged us to hide from something. Did you sense him then? Huacheng gave a slight nod. Yes. I knew it, Shilian mumbled. We chose the path to the west after that, but he was the one on the eastern path who'd killed thousands of ghosts. He'd been reborn, but he's still a little weak. He needed to use the nefarious creatures coming to Mount Tonglu as a stepping stone. Now he's recovered, and might be even stronger than before. After all, he was the world's first supreme ghost king. As they talked, Muqing noticed something amiss. Your Highness, do you know where he's taking us? I don't think this is the way out. It was Huacheng who replied, Of course this isn't the way out, because there is no way out right now. Fengshen was astonished. What? Isn't this cave your territory? You can't be lost. Of course not, Shilian replied in Huacheng's defense. White No-Face is blocking the path to the cave's exit, Huacheng explained. If you think you can defeat him in your current state, then by all means don't follow me. I won't stop you. Go right ahead. Fengshen and Muqing were both from Xianle, of course, and just like Shilian, that creature had left an indelible shadow on their hearts. They didn't want to face him unless absolutely necessary. Fengshen gazed upward. Can we punch through the top of the cave to get out? The snowy mountain is above us. Do you want to start another avalanche? Huacheng mocked. Unfortunately, they had left the Earthmaster shovel with Yin Yu in a case of emergency. Even if they did have it, none of them had studied how to use it, so they wouldn't be able to dig an escape route without making a racket and drawing attention. Then why are we running around aimlessly? As long as we run around aimlessly, he'll chase us and we can lure him away from the exit, Shilian explained. And then you two can use that chance to escape. Muqing immediately caught the issue. Wait, you two? You mean you want to split up? One group is the bait to lead him away, while the other group escapes on their own? Exactly, Shilian said. The Emperor must be informed that White No-Face has reappeared in the world. Once you both escape, find a way to notify the heavens. Wait, Muqing cut him off. You've already decided who's going to be the bait and who's going to leave? Shilian shook his head. I didn't decide. White No-Face did. Muqing understood and didn't say another word. There was nothing they could do to choose who was pursued. Among their group, White No-Face certainly would be most interested in chasing Shilian. I'll stay with you to face him, Fengshen declared without hesitation. In an emergency, Muqing had always been the one Shilian sent back to make a report, and Fengshen had always stayed behind to assist him. It seemed that ancient history was about to repeat itself. But then, Shilian glanced at Huacheng. Thanks, but there's no need. Sanlang will stay with me. How can he be the one to stay? Fengshen blurted. Huacheng's brow furrowed ominously, but Shilian only replied, I trust him. Although his voice was gentle, he was firm in his stance. Fengshen was stunned in spite of himself. Your Highness! Shilian patted his shoulder. You two go together. Mount Tonglu closed its gates, so it's hard to say whether you'll even be able to get out to spread the word. Besides, don't you still need to search for Lanchong and the child? Fengshen's face turned glum at this reminder.